and long-term goals. And of course, we want to develop indicators of success relative to implementation of the high school plan. So in a nutshell, at the end of all of this, we want a plan, and we want an action plan. And these are the work teams. And as you can see, those are the high leverage practices / categories that we've talked about. High expectations, program of study, advisory, teacher collaboration, extra help, and of course, building that culture of continuous improvement. So of course, we want to align our people, our purpose, and our values for the purpose of improvement. And as Ms. Mitchell already discussed as well, we're chunking this. So we're not saying that in year 1, we're going to implement everything, or year 2, we're going to implement everything, or year 3. So year 1, we're very intentional about implementing these things. Year 2, these things. And year 3, these things. And we thought that was best if we were going to implement these things with fidelity, intensity, and passion. And those are all the 3 things that we talked about in our high school initiative steering committee.
So when we think about this work, it's all about our students. It's all about their education, their way. And so we are like super excited to present to you the look and feel for our high school initiative. We know that in order for this to be successful, that we have to have a look and a feel that people can identify, can resonate with, and can actually support. And so our team worked really hard with Susan Doran-Kemper from Public Affairs and Janet Walsh, and they're going to come up and present the unveiling of our brand.
Susan is the one who deserves real kudos here, and I hope you'll agree. Susan is our very talented designer. But I want to give kudos to the leaders of this work and the core team too, because as communicators, sometimes we get called upon at the end when the work is over to tie things up in a neat little bow. And we know that we are best when we are connected to the work. And that's really what this team has allowed us to do. Susan has spent hours with the team as they've developed this work, hours with the visioning people as they brainstormed ideas, and then back to the core team to test market some of the branding. And so I think Laura will walk through the PowerPoint, and we're going to let Susan be the Vanna White of tonight and introduce some of these concepts.
When we began this work, we really wanted something that would be something the students could be passionate about, because there's so much passion behind the work. And, you know, as the future evolves, you know, once it's here, it's kind of already out of date. So we wanted something that presented possibilities so that it's always looking forward. Students are very connected to technology, especially apps, mobile apps. So we wanted that kind of a feel and flavor as well.
Okay, so you can see our theme, My Education, My Way. And here's the first look and feel. If you will turn around behind you. Yes, we can have the grand unveiling, Your Smart Life. And the theme is, it's all about me in terms of the student's education. And this is ready for the real world, the possibilities of connectedness. The next one is Your Classroom Reimagined. It's my tomorrow, my future, ready for the real world, digital natives. Next one is Your World Unplugged, the knowledge economy. And the last one is Your future is open, enter your way.
Cool. All right.
It's all about me. And the last one, this is the way it looks on a student. So it's all about me, and we've checked, and we can actually purchase the URL to mytomorrow.ed. It's all about me, meaning the students, and we also have little buttons that Susan made that our high school students can wear. So we hope that you proudly wear the look and feel for our new high school initiative, which is My Education, My Way. And we thank you for your time. Questions?
Does any board member have any question or any comment?
You know, I always do.
I always look to my right.
You know, I always do.
Mrs.
Questions?
Hoffman.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you. This is so exciting. It is hard to not be excited hearing from you all and your passion and your excitement for this. I have a couple questions that you can say that's in the weeds we can talk about later, but just when you mentioned how you guys have looked at so much research, I'm wondering if you looked at the research around size, high school size, and how that, the size of the school, how many kids are in it, and how that impacts learning. And then also school start times. There's so much out there now about high school start times impacting learning, so I'm wondering if you looked into those too.
Yeah, to be quite honest with you, we did not look at start times of schools, but this is actually something that we'll go back and we'll look at so that we can make sure that as we do our work, we can integrate it into our work. I will say that I don't think that we most recently looked at size in terms of school size, but that was a part of our work many years ago with the Gates.
The Gates Foundation.
And it's when we went to these smaller restructured high schools. And so what we're trying to do, although our schools have expanded and they're larger since we've added the 7th and 8th grade, is to really create communities that are smaller. And we have many examples of schools who already do that extremely well. Clark is one. It's a pretty large school, and they have 7th through 12th, but they have these communities that function and work together. But we'll be more than happy to go back and look at start times as well as size again.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
Mr. Manera.
Absolutely, this is amazing, but you know, one of the things that I'm always concerned about is with technology, and especially our students, is our security and our backup, because if we're going to rely on students to be doing projects, the dog can't eat that project anymore, but it could be lost in cyberspace. So just, I mean, you don't have to answer now, but just make sure that we are, you know, crossing our T's, dotting our I's, that we have the right safety for our students who are going to be out in the internet, and obviously the security to make sure that, you know, backup, hackers, whatever you call it.
We will definitely look at that, and I know that Jennifer will probably speak to that, especially during her presentation about technology.
Yeah, one of the things that we did this year was to purchase Easy Tech. It's a software application, particularly with our K-8 students, that teaches them technology skills as well as digital citizenship and the proper use of technology and time on the internet. And we have invested in CompuTrace to help us with maintaining the security of our assets.
Mrs. Copeland-Dansby.
Yeah, I think the work that you've done is absolutely tremendous, and so I really want to take the time to thank you for that. I think the thing that stands out to me the most is the opportunity for it to be tailored to fit me, and it is specific to each need of our children. So the first thing, Mr. Manera talked about security with the technology. I would be more concerned with the access and making sure that all of our students have access, and so I wonder how you've addressed that.
Sure. As we've been refreshing our technology, we've been adding to it. In fact, this year we're refreshing right now 5,200 devices, but that's 4,000 ads. So as we go to that 1-to-1 device ratio, in the high schools. We're hoping to give them access. The bigger challenge is whether they have access at home or not. And so that's why we're trying to get more to the cell phone device, because most students have access to cell phone. And if we can get to the mobile devices, then they can have broader access than just in the classroom.
Okay. And then I just have a question about Naviance, because I know that it is implemented in some places. I wonder, do all of our high school students have access to that now, or are they, using it across the board?
Yes, all of our high schools have access to it. Some have implemented it with a different degree of fidelity, thank you. Too much cold medicine in my head. And so that one of our initiatives here is to help all and take it down to even lower grade levels to start them younger.
Yeah, and then Mr. Lothman talked about alignment with the state report card. And so I know sometimes those things shift, or, I would just encourage us to be on the cutting edge of when there are changes. It looks like you've built in ways to be able to quickly adapt to state mandates for that.
Definitely, and that's why we've kept it at the forefront of our conversations, is that we realize that the state has yet to really totally define the new accountability system. So really our plan is really all about being agile and flexible and fluid and making sure that we can easily adapt when things happen.
Changes, that's great,
Yeah.
that's great. So I'm really excited, I think we all want to make sure that our kids, our students are ready for the workforce, for a 21st century work environment. So when I see these life-size posters, and I'm sure we're going to see them everywhere, it really puts me in that mindset. Yeah. I think you've done a fantastic work. Thank you.
Vice President Nelms.
Yeah, first of all, excellent job. I do believe in divine timing, so we kept putting you out for a reason, and I think tonight is very apropos. But before I move forward, first of all, Bill, I need a new T-shirt because I've been working out, and this is kind of tight.
Buffing up. He's buffing up.
Yeah. Size has never made a man or a board. Size has never made a man or a board member. But I would like to also add, if we can get a copy of that PowerPoint. I'm a visual learner, and I have some, not Clef notes, but I have some Chris notes. And I wanted to say, first of all, Laura, thank you. Thank you for the mission, because I think it really speaks volumes to the objective that you're going to carry out. I know that thinking outside the traditional urban education box is a challenge for all of us. You hear me constantly say that our children and those that are visiting tonight get this. Our children are not at risk, they're at promise. But it's determined by the teacher shift in attitude on how they're going to address that child's needs, both educationally, socially, emotionally, and so forth. But here's a question. And one of the things that stood out to me is routine self-evaluation. Can you kind of explain how you plan to carry that out? Because I think it's so important that in the process that you stop to recheck, relook, reassess where you're at and where you're going.
So in any team member, please feel free to jump in and speak to this. So first we want to talk about, first of all, the kids knowing where their strengths are. And I really like this idea about promise as opposed to risk. And so I'm going to give you an answer. It doesn't sound like it's the answer, but then I'll follow up in just a minute. So we want our all of our 7th and 8th grade students to get on Naviance and take a strengths assessment so that they know where they are and what strengths that they can play toward. And then during the advisory sessions, we imagine all of our kids with their advisor in Naviance, and their advisor's kind of over their shoulder, whispering in their ear, talking them through those pieces. So when we think about, so that's on a kid level, on a student level. When we think about what does those checkpoints look like for the adults, we have our weekly meetings, and so we'll constantly be checking against the measures. And we've already started to look at measures in those big categories or buckets in terms of how would we say that we're being successful and what do we need to do to improve. We also have another checkpoint with our steering committee. And so on a monthly basis, we'll be checking in with the steering committee and hearing from them and getting ideas of what we need to do to improve as well. I will say that this work will cause, this shift will cause some change. And with change, it can be a little uncomfortable. And so we're hoping that through this work, as we get information from you, the board, and we get direction from you, the board, we can also get support when things become a little challenging through this change process. So you asked an excellent question about, does everyone have access to Naviance? And the answer is yes, but does everyone use it well with fidelity? The answer is no. Through this initiative, we want it standardized across all of our schools. Not to say that it has to be exactly the same, but there are some standard level of things that you put in place. So every school doesn't have to look alike, but there are some things that, quite honestly, are non-negotiables. And I use my medical example all the time, and I hope I haven't overused it with you, but if I or a loved one were going into surgery, there's some non-negotiables I want to have. I want the surgeon to wash his or her hands. I want them to use gloves. I want the instruments to be sterilized. I want there to be a team in place, a skilled, well-trained team to handle my medical situation. I want them to be checking all along the way to see how I'm progressing, checking my blood pressure. And should a complication arise, I want that team to put an intervention in place to save my life. Those are non-negotiables.
That's it.
Can I add to that?
Please.
So we kind of alluded to this earlier in the presentation about a new high school dashboard. Once we've refined the measures that we've come up with, and some of them have become very distinct, and the number of mentoring events that they need to have, or the number of career experiences they need to have. We're going to create a dashboard so that weekly we're monitoring those things, but every school will be able to drill down and look at their own, and every teacher will be able to drill down and look at their own classroom, as well as the student will be able to, through the playbook, will be able to monitor their own experience as well.
Any other questions or comments? Lisa?
Just to echo your analogy here, I think also like the doctor has to believe that you can live, that you'll be able to survive. So I think belief in you, and I think that goes back to what Mr. Nelms was saying about at promise instead of at risk. And I would love to believe that every one of the people working with our children has that belief, but I think your number one thing that you've been talking about of high expectations, I think I hear too many times that that's not the case in every classroom, and right there, that's going to be a big change management. I was just having this conversation last night around a dinner table with a bunch of friends who we all have kids entering kindergarten. One of the families is deciding whether or not they want to send their kids to CPS. They just heard from a friend, he teaches our children, and he said he would never send his kids to a CPS school. And that is someone in front of our children every day who clearly has different expectations for his kids than the kids we trust him with every day. Hopefully that's an anomaly. Hopefully most of our teachers have the highest of expectations for our kids. But when we say that the first thing has to be high expectations, I think we need a way to measure that, and we need a way to support you all and our principals and everybody who's making sure that across the board in every single classroom is the case.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you, and I hope some of that will be addressed through the professional development. And as you are measuring your progress to your suggested outcomes along the way, in fact, I might even suggest some check-ins with the board quarterly, however will work best, just so that we can make sure that those things are happening. I do agree that we have to have folks who believe that our kids can achieve, because they indeed can achieve.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. And now I think one of the many programs and efforts here at CPS that can be described as exemplary is our second and our final presentation for this evening. And indeed, it's a follow-up to not only the Community Learning Center conference this past week, but also a follow-up to the health presentation we had a few weeks ago, a couple of meetings ago. And to present tonight for a final presentation, School-Based Mental Health Services Network is presented by Susan Shelton, who is the Executive Director of Mind Peace, and also Linda Gallagher, VP of Hamilton County Mental Health and Recovery Services Board. Did I do it right? Yes. Okay. Welcome so much. We appreciate it. And for those of you from Wittenberg, this is a program that is not duplicated anywhere else in the country. It is homegrown and remarkable, and an incredible service to our students and our schools.
Good evening, thank you.
Good evening.
Nationally, it's estimated that 12 million children under the age of 18 suffer from a mental disorder. It's also estimated 1 in 5 children under the age of 18 have 1 or more mental health disorders, and 1 in 10 children have 1 or more mental health disorders that are severe enough to impair how they function at home, in the community, and in their school. There are barriers, however, to receiving treatment and intervention. Some of these are financial. Quite a number of children remain uninsured. Stigma is another problem. Parents, family members don't always understand mental illness, they don't recognize it, and they don't seek treatment. In Cincinnati, there's a shortage of child psychiatrists, and this can contribute to long wait lists when a family does decide to seek treatment. Studies have demonstrated that programs that strengthen a student's social, emotional, and decision-making skills contributes to their receiving better grades. Research tells us that healthy students make better learners. Physical and mental health matters for school-age children. School-based mental health services focuses on reducing barriers, giving families choices, and increasing access. The school-based mental health network was formed about 10 years ago with a group of concerned advocates, stakeholders, consumers, agency representatives, and caring individuals. This group planned to increase access to mental health services for children in Hamilton County. Cincinnati Public Schools was present at that table, as well as the Mental Health Recovery Services Board and representatives from MindPeace. The Mental Health and Recovery Board's mission, then and now, is to develop and manage a system of high-quality, cost-effective alcohol, drug, and mental health services responsive to individual and family needs and differences. That mission is accomplished by funding prevention and treatment services, identifying gaps and needs in the community, and then collaborating with partners to address those gaps with interventions that have been proven to work and are accessible to children and families in whatever location best meets their needs.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us here. So MindPeace actually is an advocacy organization that started about 12 years ago by the Junior League of Cincinnati. So volunteers worked with all of the partners that Linda talked about. And when we did our research, we found, gosh, working with school-based mental health services can really make a difference. So the mission of MindPeace, which became a 501c3 nonprofit organization about 5 years ago, is to help kids get access to quality mental health care. And we do that by working at the site, the system, and the community level. We're really looking at providing a seamless system of care. And working with the board, with CPS, we've really been able to do that through school-based mental health services. This kind of, in Cincinnati, we love bubble charts, don't we? So at last week's conference, there were bubble charts everywhere. So I am copying your great example. for the exemplary example, right? So MindPeace and our network works with all these bubbles. So we have school systems, mental health providers, advocacy organizations, government agencies, and pediatricians. Pediatricians because they're the first line of defense often for families seeking mental health care. So our role within the school-based mental health network is to co-lead the network with the board, the Hamilton County Mental Health and Recovery Services Board. And we're really, the way I like to think about it is we facilitate the network in order to help make sure that we're addressing shared outcomes, which is something that community learning centers it's really critical for. That there's capacity, not only for the first school, but the 52nd school. That we all work together on areas of quality improvement and so on. We're a resource for the network. We are a voice for the customer. So we're always talking about children and families. It was an interesting comment. So the question always is it good enough that you would send your own child? I think that's a great measure. We drive implementation of our system of care values and sustainability. I think one of the things that was so unusual we found at the national conference was with the School-Based Mental Health Network, the lead mental health partners in the schools provide services that really leverage resources. So we have a sustainability model that's important. When we have these partnerships, it's really important that they're long-term. And so sustainability is key to having those long-term relationships. Providers, their mission is to partner with community learning centers in their role to help meet the need of students, families, and community. And we talked before with the high school presentation about overcoming barriers, improvements, and so on. And that's really key, and that's something that the providers are very committed to. These are some of their roles. There's a long list of them, but basically they really are committed to long-term relationships for improving not only the kids that they serve that have mental illness, but really the whole student population in the community learning center. It's really about mental wellness, not just mental illness. So have you all heard of the system of care values? Because that's sort of you have, great. It's really the foundation of our network. When we started 10 years ago, we made sure we understood our roles, we understood what our values were, and then our objectives, our goals. And these are our system of care values. And they're things that I think everyone would probably agree to. They make sense, that it's a comprehensive array of service, individualized, that's empowered by youth and family, community-based, there's smooth transitions, and so on. And this is our model of care. So the goal, and I always talk about this with the community learning centers and also with the partners, it's nirvana. And we're always trying to get to nirvana. We never do. We're really close, but we never want to get to nirvana. But it's co-location, so full-time, that it's integrated and aligned. And each community is so different. So we found that every community has a different vision, and every community wants to have different outcomes. And so we want to make sure that every partnership that's chosen, that they agree with those and they support those that alignment and that integration. It's accountable. So there's a memorandum of agreement that Julie Doppler, that legal has gone through, that the network agrees upon. It can be customized for the community, but the terms and conditions are all agreed upon. And then there's a continuum of services. And I think this is really important. The pyramid of intervention that we all look to includes also mental wellness, prevention, intervention, and treatment. So this sustainable partnership, self-sustainable partnership, the nirvana is that they would help either provide the services or lead and bring resources to bear to provide prevention, intervention, and treatment. So these are some of our outcomes because we've been working at this since this academic year 2009-10. Our first was about access to services because we never want to force families to do something that they don't want to. It's about giving them access. And so our benchmark was 80% of kids and families that were offered the opportunity to, have these services would get them. And so this past year, we're at 74% of the referrals. And this also speaks to whether the families want it, because it's always presented just as a service. And if they would like to, access that service, they can. And this is the number of kids that are in treatment. So this would be kids who have an identified mental illness, 2,233. We keep inching up. And so remember back when Linda talked about the need. So 20% of children have identified mental illness. And so what this again points to is choice. There are still many kids that are receiving services in an office-based setting, which is great. We want them to, whatever's most comfortable for the family. But there are many students that say, gosh, we like the integration of services. We like the fact that the therapist can speak with the teacher if the parents give permission and so on. This is the number of treatment hours. So this is this additional resource that's being leveraged in this community learning center setting. 45,000 hours of treatment. This is about 20 hours per student, if you want the quick math. And this is really good. When we talk with some of our advisors who are psychiatrists, they really like to see that means the kids who are in therapy are getting a continuous therapy, which they have a better chance for better outcomes if they're not in and out of therapy. And then this is additional. This is really prevention services. These are services that the partners in the schools are not reimbursed for. So these are just additional value-added services that they're providing: teacher consultations, group therapy, training to parents, training to teachers, and so on. And then these are the number of therapists that have their full-time offices in the community learning centers. So at the end of last year, 119 therapists came to work every day at community learning centers to help the staff and be part of the team. This does not count the number of case managers who may also have a full-time office, and it also doesn't count now. We have, I think now, 16 schools who have psychiatrists and pediatricians who visit those schools for families who don't have transportation and can't go to their medical appointments to get medicine. So it's a pretty robust team that's there. And then the financial picture, I just wanted to again say that we're basically leveraging resources, and the families seem to be responding very positively to being able to access those. How do we do it? So it's third-party billing to either Medicaid or private insurance for kids that opt to receive services. And then also, we're lucky because in our county, we have a mental health fund, levy fund, that has been renewed. It keeps being renewed. It's amazing. I mean, it's just amazing. So indigent funding for kids who don't have insurance, we can access that. And also, there have been some really amazing programs like, it's not a levy, but it's a mental health program, Journey to Successful Living, which is a program that is for high school students who have significant mental illness and how do they transition to the next stage in their life. And then there are also public-private partnerships and foundation grants, and that's a very small portion really in the business model. And then on our accomplishments, our last slide is, it's really that, I think that the fact that all the lead mental health partners have been chosen by the communities. So every single one of them have gone through a process, a fair process to be able to choose their partners. We've expanded the capacity. When we started, we only had, I think, 6 agencies that were part of the network. There are now 10. We also have all the shared values, the goals and roles and outcome measures that I spoke upon. We have an agreed model, Nirvana, and we have an infrastructure in place so that if community learning centers or partners are having any kind of problems or they want to improve an area, they can come to the network and get that support. And the interesting thing is we've been really working hard on quality improvements, and so every year the network chooses 2 or 3 areas to work on. Trauma-informed care is is an example of that. Improving outcome measures is another. And we work together to pilot them. And then when we get feedback, we then implement them system-wide for the district. So that's the conclusion of our presentation. And we really appreciate being part of your team.
Thank you so much for the presentation. And I'm sure we have some questions and some comments as I look over to the right. But let me, something that you did a presentation last week you did a couple as a matter of fact, and one of the things at the very end of the presentation, someone from the audience volunteered a piece of information that was interesting about that having these services in the schools helps take some of the stigma away regarding, you know, the grown-ups around this table, or at least old ones like me, and I'm the oldest around here, I'm sure, but we grew up with some sort of terrible stigma about this, and that is not good. And the fact that kids feel that they can't, even in their school setting, go in to see their therapist, or they're saying they are, and they do it. And I just think it's, and having taught teenagers for 36 years, I just think that's remarkable, that would have a positive impact on the whole community as well. And one other question, how many schools out of our, 56 or 55, which is it, Mary? 55.
We have 55. So I think, so we have 53 of the 55 schools that have chosen school-based mental health partners. And it's really, and they have themselves, you know, when it was their time, they raised their hand and said, we would really like services. It was never something that, you know, it was all about engagement and community need. So it's really, it's wonderful. It's amazing. Yeah.
53 out of our 55
Right.
schools have
So-
these services provided from the private sector and public-private partnership and what have you. And we do the in-kind, if you will, contribution by providing the space and time and utilities.
Right. I mean, that is amazing because those 119 therapists have space in the buildings and they're all, and they're
Seriously.
made part of the community. I mean, they are really, they do all the things that all the staff, they go to the games and the open house and all of that, you know, they're one of the team.
Yeah, I might have missed when you covered this too, but I think to echo Eve, like we know stigma is a big problem. My brother has schizophrenia, and so as a family, we understand how hard it is to navigate the mental health system, and even to acknowledge there is a problem and then find a solution to that is so hard. So stigma and access are two of the biggest problems, and the fact that you have found a way to eliminate the access problem and work on the stigma problem is remarkable for the health of our kids. Are we doing anything to educate families or teachers on how to identify mental health problems? I just think about that a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
So
a
if you
great
could-
question. And so I think the neat thing is that each community learning center looks at the mental health partner as another professional resource. And so what happens is first of all, before the beginning of the year, usually during the staff training, the team members are asked to make presentations around different areas, and depending on the community, it's tailored for them. You know, some community learning centers, there's unfortunately an increase in cutting, you know, or depression. Another, there's, you know, an increase in anxiety around tests or so on. Sometimes the early childhood symptoms are different than the adolescent. So each team kind of customizes, and I was at Academy of World Languages, which is interesting because you've got such a divergent population. And that group did a great job at it was a staff meeting, putting together an individualized folder for each team member, each faculty, and then they had the signs and symptoms, and then also evidence-based strategies for the classroom, which would go with the signs and symptoms. So they were really like hands-on tools that they could use. And so that happens. We also do at the end of the year it's end of the year, beginning of the new year, in August, the beginning of August, we bring all of the school-based mental health teams together, including we invite the school psychologist and also the social worker, and the resource coordinators, if they have them, together to talk about how the year has gone and what training should we use for ourselves and also out in the schools. So that's something that we just started 2 years ago.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
I want to thank you for your presentation today, and I have had the pleasure of seeing your work in progress in one of the schools, and I will really speak to how the resource coordinator and the staff folks interacted. And I think we all know that, you know, this is probably one of the larger barriers that a large number of our students encounter. And so by your services being a part of the community, it was very friendly that day and was open, and there were people being serviced, you know, as I was kind of taking a tour, what have you. So I'm really pleased and proud for you to be a partner. I'm glad to hear you talk about how you are sustaining your funding. You talked about the mental health levy and I guess reimbursements and that. Do you have private dollars that also support your organization at all? Or is it even needed?
It's hardly needed, actually, which is really good. But we do have a couple partners that the United Way has funded some of the prevention that happens. And then also we utilize for the prevention team members, some of those groups, like groups that are experts in bullying or groups that are experts on, healthy relationships, they become part of the team. The Bethesda Foundation also funds some work in 3 of the schools, and they're a great partner too. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Susan, thank you so much for not only the presentation, but helping to invent this and create this for our students. And I know on behalf of the board, Linda, we want to extend our thanks for the partnership that we have and that you are so vital to us from the Hamilton County Mental Health and Recovery Services. I mean, this is the kind of partnership that works and benefits our children and our families, and we're just so pleased. So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Exemplary. All right. Mr. Manera, do you have a tax levy resolution? So this is another part of the exemplary piece. It's getting the money for everything. Would you like to present it, please?
Absolutely, it'd be my honor. We definitely want to bring up as a board, I want to present the resolution determining to proceed with submission of a renewal tax levy. And I will present it as written, but I do want to highlight that this is to be submitted for the November 4, 2014 election. And on the back, as you receive the document for your review, it is stated like it will appear at the ballot. So it is not a tax increase. And I would encourage everyone to read it. And I present it as written.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Finance Chair, Mrs. Bates. Appreciate it. Any other questions, discussion? Do the superintendent or the treasurer have anything to say regarding this? I know we've talked about this about 3 times publicly and often around the table, so to speak, but you suggested we need to do this, and we are with you.
No, certainly we concur, and we certainly appreciate the fact that the board is bringing this up in a timely fashion so that we do have time to work for this renewal that does not raise taxes, but continues to allow us to provide the supports and academics that we currently have in the district.
Thank you very much. Roll call.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland Dansby?
Aye.
Mrs. Hoffman?
Aye.
Mr. Manera?
Aye.
Mr. Nellens?
Absolutely.
President Bolton?
Yes, thank you. Mrs. Bates, we have an update to our board's work regarding vision, mission, and strategic goals. This is something that the board's been working on for a couple of months. We're not going to take action on it tonight. Mr. Coons, who's been very involved with it, is not here this evening, but we've worked on a draft that the board has, and just today we also received some work done by some folks that you know. And if you'd like to talk a little bit about this, we'll at least present it so that when we're ready to vote on it the second time, we will have this background and probably have some time tomorrow in our budget workshop to flush some of this out and figure out where we want to go. So, Mrs. Bates?
Well, good. Well, I hope you had a chance to take a look at it. We had agreed when we were wordsmithing this that we were kind of overworking the wordsmithing and that I have
Imagine that.
yeah, that a colleague of mine does this work professionally, and she's a friend of the district, and I would ask her to offer her services to help. So she put together a more succinct version of this. So take a look and see if this really, I'm trying to get it up on email and I lost it, but
I have part of it.
okay. If this meets the initial requirements in a more succinct, kind of polished way.
And I know a lot of us felt very strongly about what we did and how we did it, and yet we have this additional kind of work product to look at as well, and perhaps can take the time outside of the meeting tonight and in preparation for tomorrow, see how we may want to incorporate some of this or keep it as is or what have you. So I think it's useful. We get so involved with it, and it's so important to us that indeed it's great to have outside eyes looking at it.
A fresh set of eyes.
Well, fresh, that would also be applicable in this case. So I don't think we have to take any more action on it tonight, but we will work on this again tomorrow, and maybe by the next board meeting on, I believe, the 28th or so, 24th, we'll be able to vote on this. So thank you for having her do that, and we wanted to keep the public informed as to our efforts in developing this, because we would like to make sure the superintendent and the treasurer know that we're trying to get this done, not only in a timely manner like the tax levy, but also so that it can inform some of the board's efforts regarding the budget and the 5-year forecast. So thanks to the board and that we've worked on it, and it's going to be ready to go shortly. Now, Superintendent. Superintendent Ronan, do you have a report for us?
Yes, I do. First, I'd like to start by saying I'd like to add my voice to those who've expressed their condolences to the family of Dr. Florence Newell, who served on this board from 2000 to 2007. Not only was she a board member, but she was my professor of reading methods at the University of Cincinnati. And I know she was an avid sports fan and would go to the Taft High School games. In addition, also Willis Holloway, he was an assistant superintendent in Cincinnati Public from 1970 through 1988. He passed away on March 26th, so our condolences to his family. And just a week ago, a long-term substitute teacher, Kevin Shea, who was actually in a position at Taft High School, he also passed away right at spring break. So our condolences to his family. Now, moving to happier topics, as mentioned before, the community learning centers of our district were certainly featured at that wonderful conference last week. But in addition to that, it was a very busy week. We had David Johns, who was the executive director of the White House Initiatives on Educational Excellence for African Americans, paid a visit to Schroeder High School, and I believe, Elisa, you were there, and Erica, you were there. And the students did a great job of giving an overview of the Schroeder Moore program. And I know their stories were so compelling that we will schedule a larger presentation at a later board meeting. But thank you for attending that. And it was a busy week. And we also had officials from the Ohio Department of Education here on Friday. So the White House, ODE, and a national conference. So I'm glad this week's a bit calmer. And that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you, Superintendent Ronan. Do I have a motion to approve the revised recommendations of the superintendent that you have before you with the revisions handed out by staff earlier this evening?
So move.
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second. Any questions or comments for the superintendent regarding the revised superintendent recommendations?
I have a quick
Mrs.
question,
Hoffman.
and this is, I think, us still climbing the learning curve. At the very end, there is a declaration of urgent necessity for Taft. Now, Taft wasn't part of the FMP, right? So is that $150,000 coming out of the general fund for their roof?
I believe we used bonds for that,
Okay.
Taft Elementary. So I believe we can put the new roof on as part of House Bill 264, possibly.
That's going to be general fund.
Nope, it's going to be general fund.
It's general fund.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments for?
Yeah, I have
That
a
was hopeful thinking on the part of the superintendent.
Yes, I try to keep everything out of the general fund.
From bonds.
Yeah, I have a comment, and I just want to say to you, Madam Superintendent, and I'm led to do this at this time. We often think of your role as the face of the community, which is true, and the fact that you're given the task of directing the district, which is true. But I also just want to thank you for always being ever ready, ever present, and ever vigilant in your role as a superintendent in terms of sacrificing time to be at events that some of us would probably consider to be insignificant or mundane, but just want to say I appreciate you as a board member, and I might be speaking on the behalf of others, and I think personally we're blessed to have you as our superintendent for this season. And so, Diana, I'll give you your accolades another day when I'm led to do so. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for the work that you do.
Yeah, I have to echo Mr. Nams, and it really showed last week when there were thousands of people here from everywhere across the country, and just the warmth and just how folks talked about the district and all the site visits, and people were buzzing everywhere I went last week. And so hats off to our superintendent and to the administrative staff.
Any other questions or comments or accolades?
Yeah, you really carry this district like a mother hen would her chicks.
Okay.
That's a metaphor. That's a metaphor from somewhere. So
I will take that, Mr. Nelms. Thank you.
Do I have a motion and we have discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Bates.
Aye.
Mrs. Copeland Dansby.
Aye.
Mrs. Hoffman.
Aye.
Mr. Manera.
Aye.
Mr. Nelms. President Bolton.
Aye. Do I have a motion to approve the report of the treasurer?
So moved.
Mrs. Bates
Second.
and Mrs. Copeland Dansby. Any questions or comments for the treasurer? Oh, please. Well, before she thinks of one, we're going to take a roll call.
amen.
Any other questions, comments? Roll call.
Mrs. Bates.
Aye.
Copeland Dansby. Mrs. Hoffman.
Aye.
Mr. Manera.
Aye.
Mr. Nelms.
Aye.
President Bolton.
Aye. And I believe, Mr. Nelms, you have some issues you'd like to update the board?
Yeah, sometimes I just get off on these tangents, so y'all just forgive me. But I just want to just be mindful of two major events that's coming up for those that are in the audience and those that are viewing. That 4 years ago, we thought it would be very significant to highlight and identify former student athletes that matriculated through this very district. And we have some very illustrious student athletes: Pete Rose, Carl Ward, Walter Johnson, Al Nelson, and so on. Mary Weinberg, yeah, Mary Weinberg. Anybody else? But for the most part, we wanted to honor them with a district-wide tribute to their accolades and high school achievements. So this Thursday, April 17th at Paul Brown Stadium, we're going to induct our 5th class of honorees, posthumous coaches and athletes. And if you have a mind to attend, I think you can call 363-0411 for tickets. And tickets have been very robust. And they're airing a segment talking about this very Hall of Fame induction ceremony. So that's one. Secondly, most of you know that I am a proud graduate of Taft High School. So if anyone says nothing good comes out of Taft, that's a lie because you're looking at it. But I also want to say that on that note, Taft has had illustrious graduating student athletes, and so it's going to be their first induction Hall of Fame, and there's about 21 that's been inducted Friday night, this April the 18th at Taft High School, starting at 6:30 and 7. And so the board members, board colleagues, superintendent, administrators, if you have an inkling to attend, be my guests to attend. And I just wanted to make sure that we did a shout out on that. My third inquiry, we constantly talk about social emotional learning and service workshop, and as we just saw the presentation about doing new and innovative things, I'm going to make this an assignment for our superintendent and also Dr. Gabe Lofton, to kind of explore how we can get the ball rolling in this particular curriculum design and what we need to do to make sure it becomes a reality real soon. And that's it for me.
Thank you. Any other updates or inquiries by board members? Any assignments from board members?
Other than number 3.
One you just gave?
Right.
No assignments? We're adjourned.